Imagine this, you're sitting in a meeting at your office in downtown Chicago and you've got the perfect solution to the problem everyone's been wrestling with for weeks. You raise your hand, share your brilliant idea, and crickets. Complete silence. Then, 5 minutes later, someone else suggests something similar and suddenly everyone's nodding and calling it genius. Sound familiar? If you've ever felt like you're constantly overlooked even when you give your absolute best, you're not alone. It's one of the most frustrating experiences in modern life. You see other people who seem to effortlessly command attention and respect while you're left wondering what the heck you're doing wrong. Maybe it's that colleague who walks into the room and everyone automatically turns to listen. Or that friend who somehow always gets the best service at restaurants without even trying. Here's the thing that most people don't realize. Getting respect and priority from others isn't about being the smartest person in the room or working the hardest. It's about understanding how human psychology actually works. And lucky for us, some of the most powerful insights into human behavior come from ancient Stoic philosophers who figured this stuff out over 2,000 years ago. Today, we're going to uncover 9 psychological strategies that are rooted in timeless Stoic wisdom but work like magic in our modern world. These aren't manipulation tactics or fake personality tricks. They're genuine approaches to human interaction that will naturally make people want to prioritize you, listen to you, and value your presence. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, once said something that perfectly captures why these strategies work. The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane. In a world where everyone's shouting for attention on social media and trying to be the loudest voice in every conversation, going against the grain with these subtle but powerful approaches will make you stand out like a lighthouse in the fog. Each strategy builds on the next one, so I really encourage you to stick with me through all 9. Miss one and you'll miss how they all work together to create that magnetic presence that draws people in. These aren't just random tips, they're a complete system for transforming how people see and respond to you. Trick 1. How to be mysteriously attractive without being fake. Let me tell you about Sarah, a marketing manager I know who works at a tech startup in San Francisco. When she first joined the company, she was like most of us, eager to fit in and be liked. She'd share every detail about her weekend plans, post constantly on the company Slack, and always volunteer way too much personal information during team meetings. She was friendly, sure, but somehow people treated her as background noise. Then something shifted. Sarah started being more selective about what she shared and when. Instead of posting her entire life story on social media, she'd share just enough to be interesting but leave people wanting to know more. When colleagues asked about her weekend, instead of a 20-minute breakdown of every restaurant she visited, she'd smile and say something like, "I discovered this amazing little place downtown, had the best conversation with a stranger there." Then she'd change the subject, leaving people curious about what that conversation was about. Within a few months, something fascinating happened. People started seeking Sarah out. They'd invite her to lunch specifically to hear her stories. Her opinions suddenly carried more weight in meetings. She hadn't become a different person, she just learned the art of strategic revelation. This is what the ancient Stoics understood about human nature. We're naturally drawn to mystery, to puzzles that beg to be solved. When you maintain an element of enigma about yourself, you compel others to lean in closer, to want to discover what lies beneath the surface. It's not about being distant or playing games, it's about understanding the psychology of curiosity and using it wisely. Marcus Aurelius captured this perfectly when he said, "The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane." In our world of constant oversharing, where people broadcast every meal, every thought, and every emotion, choosing to be more selective with your personal information automatically sets you apart from the crowd. Think about it this way: when everyone else is an open book, being a novel with some pages still unread makes you infinitely more interesting. This doesn't mean creating fake stories about yourself or being dishonest. That's manipulation, and people can smell it from a mile away. Instead, it's about mastering the art of timing and revelation. Here's how this looks in real life. When you're at a networking event in Manhattan and someone asks what you do for fun, instead of listing every hobby you've ever tried, pick one interesting thing and hint at depth without revealing everything. Maybe you say, "I've been exploring some pretty fascinating historical sites around the city lately," rather than launching into a detailed explanation of your weekend Civil War battlefield tours. The key is sharing enough to engage, but withholding enough to intrigue. You want people to think, there's definitely more to this person than meets the eye. This approach works because it triggers what psychologists call the curiosity gap, that irresistible urge we feel when we sense there's more to discover. But here's where most people mess this up. They think being mysterious means being cold or aloof. That's not it at all. You can be warm, engaging, and genuinely interested in others while still maintaining some personal boundaries around what you share and when. The goal isn't to become an ice queen or king, it's to become someone whose thoughts and opinions feel valuable because they're not constantly available. This strategy also works because it shows self-respect. When you're selective about what you reveal, you're essentially saying, "My personal life has value and not everyone gets access to all of it." People unconsciously pick up on this and start treating your time and attention as more precious. In our digital age, this might mean not responding to every text immediately, not posting every thought on social media, or not always being the first person to share personal details in group conversations. It's about creating space for others to wonder, to be curious, to want to know more. The beautiful thing about this approach is that as people become more curious about you, they naturally start prioritizing your presence and opinions. They begin to see time with you as special rather than guaranteed. Your words carry more weight because you don't waste them on trivial chatter. Remember, authenticity is still your North Star here. You're not creating a fake persona, you're simply being more intentional about the timing and depth of your self-disclosure. You're still being genuinely you, just with better boundaries and more strategic sharing. As you start practicing this mysterious magnetism, you'll notice something interesting happening. People will start leaning in when you speak, asking follow-up questions, and genuinely wanting to spend more time with you. But here's where it gets even more powerful. When you combine this air of mystery with our next strategy, you'll discover a tool that can completely transform how people respond to you in conversations. Trick 2. When to stay silent and why it's your secret weapon. Imagine this scene. You're in a heated budget meeting at your company's Dallas office. The marketing team and sales team are going at it, voices getting louder, everyone talking over each other about resource allocation. Your boss looks frustrated, the marketing director is getting defensive, and the sales manager is practically shouting about missed targets. Everyone's jumping in with their opinions, adding fuel to the fire. Everyone except you. You sit back, arms relaxed, making eye contact with different speakers, occasionally nodding. You don't jump into the verbal chaos. Instead, you wait. The arguing continues for another few minutes until there's finally a natural pause. That moment when everyone's run out of steam and the room falls quiet. That's when you speak. Your voice is calm, measured. I've been listening to both sides, and I think I see where we might find some middle ground. Suddenly, every head in the room turns toward you. Your boss leans forward. Even the people who were shouting moments before are now hanging on your every word. This is the power of strategic silence in action, and it's one of the most underestimated tools in human psychology. Most people think that being heard means being loud. They believe that influence comes from dominating conversations, from always having something to say. But the ancient Stoics understood something profound about human nature. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Epictetus, who knew a thing or two about influence despite being born a slave, put it perfectly: "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This isn't just ancient wisdom, it's a psychological strategy that works because of how our brains are wired. When you hold back in conversations, something fascinating happens. You create what psychologists call a conversational vacuum. Just like nature abhors a physical vacuum, people are psychologically uncomfortable with silence in social situations. They start filling those gaps, often revealing way more than they intended. They'll share their real motivations, their fears, their actual opinions, information that gives you incredible insight into how to respond effectively. Think about job interviews. The candidate who talks nonstop, trying to fill every silence, often comes across as nervous or desperate. But the person who can sit comfortably with a pause, who takes a moment to think before responding, projects confidence and thoughtfulness. Employers unconsciously interpret this as competence and self-assurance. Here's how this plays out in everyday situations. You're at a family dinner in your aunt's house in Phoenix, and your cousin starts complaining about his job. Instead of immediately jumping in with advice or your own work stories, you listen. You ask a thoughtful question. You pause before responding. What happens? Your cousin keeps talking, revealing the real issue isn't his boss but his own lack of confidence. Now you can offer genuinely helpful insight instead of generic advice. Or consider networking events. While everyone else is rapid-firing their elevator pitches, you take a different approach. You ask questions and actually listen to the answers. You pause thoughtfully before responding. People walk away from conversations with you feeling heard and understood, which is incredibly rare in those environments. Guess who they remember and want to connect with later? The key to strategic silence isn't just staying quiet. It's about being intentionally present during those quiet moments. You're not zoning out or planning what to say next. You're actively absorbing information, reading body language, picking up on emotional undertones that the talkers in the room completely miss. This strategy works particularly well in conflict situations. When someone's angry or upset, their instinct is often to match that energy, to defend or argue back. But when you respond to heated emotion with calm silence, something almost magical happens. The other person's energy has nowhere to go. They often end up de-escalating themselves, and when you do finally speak, your words carry enormous weight because you've demonstrated emotional control. But here's the crucial balance. Strategic silence isn't about being the strong, silent type who never contributes. That just makes you forgettable. It's about making your words count. When you do speak, people listen because they know you don't waste words on meaningless chatter. In our hyper-connected world, where everyone's constantly talking, posting, commenting, and sharing opinions, the person who can be comfortable with silence stands out dramatically. You become the calm center in a storm of noise, and people naturally gravitate toward that stability. The timing aspect is crucial too. There's a difference between an awkward silence that makes everyone uncomfortable and a purposeful pause that creates anticipation. The key is reading the room and understanding when silence serves you and when it doesn't. Practice this in low-stakes situations first. Next time you're in a group conversation, try waiting an extra beat before responding. Notice how people react when you pause thoughtfully instead of jumping in immediately. You'll be amazed at how much more weight your eventual words carry. As powerful as strategic silence can be, it becomes even more impactful when you combine it with the ability to craft your words carefully when you do choose to speak. The next strategy will show you exactly how to make every word count when you break that silence. Trick 3. The story trick that changes everyone's mind. Let me tell you about 2 different presentations I witnessed at a tech conference in Austin last year. Both speakers were trying to convince the audience to adopt new cybersecurity protocols. Exactly the kind of dry, technical topic that usually puts people to sleep. The first speaker, a brilliant engineer, spent 20 minutes rattling off statistics about data breaches, showing charts about vulnerability percentages, and explaining technical specifications. The audience was polite but clearly checking their phones. When he finished, there was scattered applause and people immediately started heading for the coffee station. Then the second speaker took the stage. She started like this: 3 months ago, Jennifer thought she was just helping a coworker when she clicked on what looked like an urgent email from IT. She had no idea that a single click would lead to her small marketing firm in Denver losing every client file they'd built over 15 years. By the time they realized what happened, their entire business was being held hostage by hackers demanding $50,000 in Bitcoin. You could hear a pin drop. Every phone went away. People leaned forward in their seats. For the next 15 minutes, she wove Jennifer's story through her technical recommendations, showing how each security measure could have prevented this disaster. When she finished, the audience gave her a standing ovation. Same information, completely different impact. That's the power of storytelling. The ancient Stoics understood something that modern neuroscience has now confirmed. Our brains are literally wired for stories. When we hear facts and data, only the language processing centers of our brain activate. But when we hear a story, something amazing happens. The same areas of our brain that would be active if we were actually experiencing those events light up. We don't just understand the story, we feel it. Epictetus captured this beautifully when he said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the view which they take of them." Stories don't just convey information, they shape how people view and interpret that information. They provide the lens through which others see your point, and that lens determines whether they accept or reject what you're saying. Think about the most persuasive people you know. They're probably not the ones who overwhelm you with facts and figures. They're the ones who can paint a picture with their words, who can make you see and feel what they're describing. They understand that changing someone's mind isn't about logic alone. It's about emotion and connection. Here's how this works in everyday situations. Let's say you're trying to convince your team at work in Seattle to take on a challenging new project. You could list all the potential benefits, show them the market research, and explain the strategic advantages. Or you could tell them about another company that faced a similar challenge, paint a picture of the obstacles they overcame, and help your team see themselves as the heroes of their own success story. Which approach do you think would be more compelling? The key to effective storytelling isn't just entertainment. It's creating what psychologists call transportation. This is when your listener becomes so absorbed in your narrative that they temporarily lose awareness of their surroundings and become emotionally invested in the outcome. When someone is transported by your story, their defenses drop, and they become much more open to your message. But here's where most people mess this up. They think storytelling means making things up or being overly dramatic. That's not it at all. The most powerful stories are often the simplest and most authentic ones. They're about real people facing real challenges that your audience can relate to. Maybe you're trying to motivate your teenage daughter to take her studies more seriously. Instead of lecturing about the importance of good grades, you might tell her about your college roommate who struggled in high school but found her passion in chemistry class, leading to a career she loves. You're not preaching. You're sharing a story that helps her see new possibilities for herself. The structure matters too. The most compelling stories follow a simple pattern. Someone faces a challenge, struggles with it, and either overcomes it or learns something valuable from the experience. This pattern resonates with us because it mirrors our own life experiences and gives us hope that we can overcome our challenges. 2. In business settings, this might mean sharing customer success stories instead of just product features. In personal relationships, it could mean sharing your own vulnerable moments instead of just giving advice. In any situation where you want to influence or persuade, stories create the emotional connection that pure logic cannot. Here's a practical tip. Start collecting stories. Pay attention to interesting experiences, your own and others. Notice moments of struggle, breakthrough, failure, and success. These become your toolkit for future conversations where you need to make a point or change someone's perspective. The beauty of storytelling is that it doesn't feel like persuasion to the listener. They're not thinking, "This person is trying to convince me of something." They're thinking, "This is interesting. I wonder what happens next." By the time the story ends, your message has been planted in their mind through emotion and imagery rather than argument and pressure. As powerful as storytelling can be for changing minds, it becomes even more effective when you combine it with genuine generosity. The next strategy will show you how giving first can create an almost irresistible urge in others to give back to you. Trick 4. Give first, get everything back, the psychology of favors. There's a coffee shop owner in Brooklyn named Maria who figured out something most business owners never learn. Instead of focusing on what she could get from customers, she started thinking about what she could give them first. Every morning, she'd offer free coffee samples to people walking by, remember regulars' names and their usual orders, and even let people use her Wi-Fi and sit for hours without pressure to buy anything. Within 6 months, her little shop went from struggling to survive to having lines out the door. Customers became evangelists, bringing friends and posting about her on social media. Business owners from the neighborhood started holding meetings there. Maria had tapped into one of the most powerful forces in human psychology: reciprocity. But here's what's fascinating: Maria wasn't trying to manipulate anyone. She genuinely cared about creating a positive experience for people. And that authenticity made all the difference, because people can sense when kindness is real versus when it's calculated. This is the principle that the Stoic philosopher Seneca understood when he wrote, "While we teach, we learn." The act of giving, whether it's knowledge, help, or simple kindness, creates invisible bonds that naturally encourage others to give back. It's not about keeping score or expecting immediate returns. It's about understanding that humans are wired to reciprocate when they receive genuine value. Think about the last time someone did you an unexpected favor. Maybe a coworker stayed late to help you finish a project, or a neighbor brought in your packages when you were out of town. How did it make you feel about that person? Chances are you felt grateful and probably looked for ways to return the kindness. That's reciprocity in action, and it happens automatically, often without us even realizing it. The key word here is genuine. When you offer help, share knowledge, or do small favors with authentic intent, people sense that sincerity. They don't feel manipulated or pressured. Instead, they feel valued and appreciated, which creates a natural desire to reciprocate. Let's say you're new to a company in Miami, and you notice a colleague struggling with a presentation. Instead of keeping your head down and focusing only on your own work, you offer to share some templates that worked well for you in the past. You don't ask for anything in return or even mention that you might need help someday. You just offer because you can. What happens next is predictable. That colleague remembers your kindness. When opportunities arise, maybe there's a spot opening on an interesting project, or someone asks for recommendations for a promotion, guess whose name comes up? The person who helped without being asked. This principle works in personal relationships too. Instead of always waiting for friends to reach out, be the one who checks in on people. Send that encouraging text when you know someone's having a tough week. Offer to help a friend move, even when it's inconvenient. Share opportunities that might benefit others, even if there's nothing in it for you. The beautiful thing about genuine reciprocity is that it compounds over time. Each act of giving creates goodwill that spreads beyond just the person you helped. People talk about kindness. They remember it. They look for ways to pass it forward, and often, that comes back to benefit you in ways you never expected. But here's where people often go wrong. They give with strings attached, or they keep mental scorecards of who owes them what. That approach backfires because people can sense the underlying expectation. True reciprocity only works when your giving is selfless and authentic. I know someone in Chicago who built an incredible professional network simply by being helpful. Whenever he met someone new, instead of immediately pitching his services or asking for referrals, he'd ask questions about their challenges and look for ways he could assist. Sometimes it was connecting them with someone in his network. Other times it was sharing an article or resource that might help. He never asked for anything in return. Over the years, this approach created a network of people who genuinely wanted to help him succeed. When he eventually started his own consulting business, he had clients lined up before he even officially launched, all because of the goodwill he built through years of giving first. The timing aspect is crucial too. The best time to build these relationships is before you need them. If you only start being helpful when you need something yourself, people notice that pattern. But when you're consistently generous with your time, knowledge, and support, you create a reservoir of goodwill that naturally flows back to you. This doesn't mean being a pushover or saying yes to everything. Healthy boundaries are important. It's about being genuinely helpful when you can, in ways that feel authentic to you. As you start practicing this principle of giving first, you'll notice something interesting happening. People will start seeing you as someone they can count on, someone worth prioritizing. But this foundation of reciprocity becomes even more powerful when you combine it with a deep sense of self-worth that makes others naturally want to treat you well. Trick 5. Why people who love themselves get more respect. I once knew two people who worked at the same marketing agency in Los Angeles. Both were talented, hardworking, and genuinely nice people. But the way others treated them was like night and day. The first person, let's call him Jake, was constantly apologizing for everything. He'd apologize for speaking up in meetings, for taking lunch breaks, even for asking clarifying questions about projects. When his boss gave him unrealistic deadlines, he'd just nod and work weekends to make it happen. When colleagues interrupted him or dismissed his ideas, he'd shrink back and stay quiet. Jake was always available, always accommodating, always putting everyone else's needs before his own. The second person, Sarah, had a completely different energy. She was kind and collaborative, but she also knew her worth. When she spoke in meetings, she did so with quiet confidence. She took her lunch breaks without guilt. If someone gave her an unrealistic deadline, she'd respectfully explain what was actually possible and suggest alternatives. She said no to requests that would compromise her other commitments, and she did it without lengthy explanations or apologies. Guess which one got promoted first? Guess which one people sought out for important projects? It wasn't Jake, despite his willingness to do anything for anyone. Here's what Sarah understood that Jake didn't. When you don't value yourself, other people won't value you either. It's not mean or unfair, it's just human psychology. We take cues from others about how to treat them, and if someone consistently signals that their time, opinions, and needs aren't important, we unconsciously start treating them that way. Marcus Aurelius captured this perfectly when he said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. The strength he's talking about comes from within. It's the unshakable knowledge of your own worth that doesn't depend on external validation or approval from others. This isn't about being arrogant or thinking you're better than everyone else. It's about having a healthy relationship with yourself, recognizing your strengths, accepting your flaws, and treating yourself with the same kindness and respect you'd show a good friend. When you prioritize yourself in healthy ways, something interesting happens. People start mirroring that behavior back to you. They begin to see your time as valuable because you treat it as valuable. They start respecting your opinions because you express them with confidence. They prioritize your needs because you've shown them that your needs matter. Think about someone you really respect. Chances are they have this quality: they're comfortable in their own skin, they know their worth, and they don't constantly seek approval from others. There's something magnetic about that kind of self-assurance. It draws people in because it's so rare in our world of constant comparison and external validation seeking. This shows up in countless everyday situations. When you're at a restaurant in Denver and your order comes out wrong, do you eat it anyway to avoid bothering the server? Or do you politely ask for what you actually ordered? When a friend consistently cancels plans at the last minute, do you just accept it and keep making yourself available? Or do you have a respectful conversation about reliability? These might seem like small moments, but they're actually opportunities to demonstrate self-respect. And people notice. They notice when you advocate for yourself appropriately. They notice when you maintain boundaries without being aggressive about it. They notice when you speak up for what you need instead of suffering in silence. The key is balance. There's a huge difference between healthy self-respect and selfish entitlement. Self-respect means valuing yourself enough to communicate your needs clearly, set appropriate boundaries, and invest in your own growth and well-being. Entitlement means expecting special treatment or putting your needs above everyone else's without consideration. Self-respect also means taking care of yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally. When you exercise regularly, eat well, pursue interests that fulfill you, and surround yourself with positive people, you're sending a message to the world about your worth. You're saying, I matter enough to invest in myself. This investment in yourself creates what psychologists call a positive feedback loop. When you feel good about yourself, you show up differently in the world. You're more confident, more authentic, more willing to take appropriate risks. People respond positively to that energy, which reinforces your sense of self-worth, which makes you show up even better. I've seen this transformation happen countless times. People who learn to prioritize themselves appropriately don't become selfish or difficult to work with. They become more effective, more respected, and ironically, more generous because they're giving from a place of abundance rather than depletion. The practical application is straightforward but requires practice. Start saying no to requests that don't align with your priorities or values. Stop apologizing for taking up space or having needs. Invest time and energy in activities that genuinely fulfill you, not just what you think will impress others. Speak up when you have something valuable to contribute, even if you're nervous about it. When you consistently demonstrate self-respect through your actions and choices, people unconsciously adjust how they treat you. They start seeing you as someone whose time is valuable, whose opinions matter, and whose presence is a privilege rather than a given. As powerful as self-respect is for earning respect from others, it becomes even more impactful when you combine it with the ability to make others feel truly heard and valued. The next strategy will show you how genuine listening can make you absolutely unforgettable to everyone you meet. Trick 6. The listening secret that makes you unforgettable. There's a guy named David who works in sales at a tech company in Atlanta, and he's absolutely terrible at small talk. He's not particularly charming, he doesn't have the best sense of humor, and he's definitely not the most charismatic person in the room. Yet somehow, he's consistently the top performer on his team, and clients specifically request to work with him. His secret: he's mastered something that 99% of people think they're good at, but actually aren't: genuine listening. I watched David in action at a client meeting last year. While other salespeople were mentally preparing their pitches and waiting for their turn to talk, David was completely focused on what the client was saying. He wasn't just hearing the words, he was listening for the emotions behind them, the concerns they weren't directly expressing, the real problems they needed solved. When the client mentioned being frustrated with their current software, David didn't immediately jump in with his product features. Instead, he asked, "What's the most frustrating part of your day because of that software issue?" The client's whole demeanor changed. For the next 10 minutes, they opened up about workflow problems, team frustrations, and budget concerns that hadn't been mentioned in any preliminary materials. By the end of that conversation, David knew exactly how to position his solution, and more importantly, the client felt completely understood. They didn't just buy his product, they became advocates for his company. This is the power of genuine listening, and it's one of the most undervalued skills in our noisy, distracted world. Epictetus understood this when he said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." But here's what most people miss. Real listening isn't just about being quiet while someone else talks. Think about your typical conversation. Someone starts telling you about their problem, and within seconds, your brain is already formulating advice, thinking of similar experiences you've had, or planning what you're going to say next. You're physically present, but mentally, you're somewhere else entirely. The person talking can sense this, even if they can't put their finger on why the conversation feels unsatisfying. Now contrast that with what it feels like when someone truly listens to you. They make eye contact. They ask follow-up questions that show they're actually processing what you're saying. They reflect back what they've heard to make sure they understand. They're not rushing to give advice or share their own stories. They're genuinely curious about your experience. How does that make you feel? Valued, understood, important. And what do you think about that person afterward? You remember them. You trust them. You want to spend more time with them. Here's what genuine listening looks like in practice. Last month, I watched a manager in Boston handle a situation with a frustrated employee. Instead of immediately trying to solve the problem or defend company policy, she said, "Tell me more about what's been going on." Then she actually listened to the answer. She asked clarifying questions. She acknowledged the employee's feelings. Only after she fully understood the situation did she work with the employee to find solutions. The result? The employee went from considering quitting to becoming one of the most engaged team members. Not because the manager fixed everything, but because she made the employee feel heard and valued. This skill is incredibly rare because it requires something most people struggle with: getting out of your own head. When you're genuinely listening, you're not thinking about yourself, your opinions, or your responses. You're completely focused on understanding another person's experience. But here's the secret that makes this strategy so powerful. When you make someone feel truly heard, you become associated with that positive feeling. They don't just remember what you talked about, they remember how you made them feel. And that emotional connection is what makes you unforgettable. The practical application requires conscious effort at first. When someone starts talking, resist the urge to immediately relate it to your own experience. Instead, ask questions that help you understand their perspective better. What was that like for you? How did that make you feel? What do you think would help in that situation? Pay attention to nonverbal cues too. Someone might say they're fine with a situation, but their body language or tone suggests otherwise. A good listener picks up on these subtleties and creates space for the person to share what's really going on. Here's a challenge. For the next week, try to have at least one conversation each day where your only goal is to understand the other person's perspective. Don't try to solve their problems. Don't share similar experiences. Don't give advice unless specifically asked. Just listen with genuine curiosity. You'll be amazed at what happens. People will start seeking you out for conversations. They'll trust you with more personal information. They'll value your opinion more because they know you actually understand their situation before offering input. The beautiful irony is that by focusing less on being heard and more on hearing others, you become someone people desperately want to listen to. As powerful as genuine listening can be for building deep connections, it becomes even more impactful when you combine it with strategic availability. Trick 7. How to be wanted by being less available. 2 restaurants in downtown Portland taught me everything I need to know about the psychology of scarcity. The first one, let's call it Always Open, has no reservations, accepts walk-ins anytime, and bends over backward to accommodate every customer request. The food is decent, the service is friendly, and you can always get a table. The second restaurant, Reservation Only, is open just 4 nights a week, takes reservations 2 months in advance, and has a strict no substitutions policy. The food is good, not dramatically better than the first place, but there's always a waiting list, and people talk about eating there like it's a major accomplishment. Guess which one people value more? Guess which one charges higher prices and has customers who rave about the experience? It's not the one that's always available and eager to please. This is the psychology of scarcity in action, and it applies to human relationships just as much as it does to restaurants. When something is readily available all the time, we unconsciously assign it less value. When something is selective and harder to access, we perceive it as more valuable and desirable. Marcus Aurelius understood this principle when he wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. it is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. The key insight here is that happiness and fulfillment come from within, not from constantly being available to others or seeking their approval. When you're comfortable with yourself and your own company, you naturally become more selective about how you spend your time and energy. Think about the people in your life who command the most respect and attention. They're probably not the ones who are always available, always saying yes to every request, always dropping everything to accommodate others. Instead, they're likely the people who are thoughtful about their commitments, who value their own time, and who make you feel special when they do choose to spend time with you. This doesn't mean being rude, flaky, or playing hard to get in a manipulative way. It means recognizing that your time and attention are valuable resources that should be invested thoughtfully. When you treat your time as precious, other people start treating it that way too. Here's how this looks in real life. Let's say you're part of a friend group in Chicago and there's always someone organizing group activities. If you're always the first to say yes, always available for last-minute plans, and never have any conflicts because you keep your schedule completely open, you become the default option. People assume you'll be there, so they don't put much thought into including you. But if you're sometimes unavailable because you have other commitments, interests, or simply because you value your downtime, something interesting happens. When you do show up, people are genuinely happy to see you. Your presence feels like a choice rather than a given, which makes it more meaningful. In professional settings, this principle is equally powerful. The consultant who's always available for calls, always willing to work weekends, and never pushes back on unreasonable requests often gets taken for granted. Meanwhile, the consultant who has clear boundaries, limited availability, and selective client criteria is seen as more valuable and commands higher rates. The key is being authentic about your boundaries. Don't manufacture fake busyness or pretend to be unavailable when you're not. Instead, actually invest in yourself and your own interests. Pursue hobbies that fulfill you. Spend time on personal growth. Maintain friendships and relationships that energize you. When you have a rich, full life, you naturally become more selective about additional commitments. This approach also prevents the resentment that builds up when you're constantly overextending yourself for others. When you're always saying yes to everyone else's priorities, you end up feeling depleted and taken advantage of. But when you're thoughtful about your commitments and only say yes to things that truly align with your values and goals, you show up as a better version of yourself. I know someone in Miami who transformed her social life by applying this principle. She used to be the friend who was always available, always planning events, always accommodating everyone else's schedules. She felt exhausted and unappreciated. Then she started being more selective. She began saying no to plans that didn't genuinely interest her. She started pursuing her own hobbies and interests. She became less immediately available for every social request. The result? Her friendships actually improved. People started valuing her time more. When she did show up to events, friends were genuinely excited to see her. She became someone people specifically wanted to include, rather than someone they just assumed would be there. The balance is crucial here. You want to be selective without being antisocial, unavailable without being unreliable. The goal is to make your presence feel like a gift rather than a guarantee. When you master this balance, you'll notice people start treating your time with more respect, your opinions carry more weight, and your company becomes something people genuinely appreciate rather than take for granted. But this selective availability becomes even more powerful when combined with emotional stability that makes you a calming presence in chaotic situations. Trick 8. Stay cool when everyone else loses it. Emotional control. Picture this scene. It's 3 p.m. on a Friday at a software company in Austin, and everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. The main server crashed, taking down the client's website right before their biggest sale of the year. The phones are ringing nonstop with angry customers. The CEO is pacing around the office, visibly stressed. Half the development team is arguing about whose code caused the problem, while the other half is frantically trying to fix it. In the middle of this chaos sits Rachel, the lead systems administrator. While everyone else is panicking, she's methodically working through her checklist, her voice calm and steady as she coordinates the recovery effort. She's not ignoring the crisis or pretending it's not serious. She's just not letting the emotional chaos around her dictate her response. Within 2 hours, the system is back online. But here's what's interesting. In the weeks that followed, Rachel became the person everyone turned to when problems arose. Not because she was the most technically skilled person on the team, but because she had demonstrated something incredibly rare and valuable: the ability to stay calm and think clearly when everyone else was losing their minds. This is emotional mastery in action, and it's one of the most powerful ways to command respect and become indispensable in any situation. When you can remain composed while others are reactive, you become what psychologists call an emotional anchor, the stable point that others naturally gravitate toward in turbulent times. Epictetus, who understood human psychology better than most modern experts, put it perfectly: we cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. This isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending problems don't exist. It's about recognizing that your response to a situation is often more important than the situation itself. Think about the people you most respect and admire. Chances are they share this quality of emotional stability. They don't get rattled easily. They don't let other people's emotions dictate their own mood. When faced with challenges, they take a breath, assess the situation, and respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. This skill is incredibly valuable because most people are emotional ping-pong balls, bouncing between reactions based on whatever's happening around them. Someone cuts them off in traffic and they're angry for the next hour. They get a critical email and they spend the day stressed and defensive. A coworker is having a bad day and suddenly they're in a bad mood too. But when you can maintain your emotional equilibrium regardless of external circumstances, you stand out dramatically. You become the person others want to be around because your presence is calming and stabilizing. You become the person people trust with important decisions because they know you won't make choices based on temporary emotions. Here's how this looks in everyday situations. Your teenage son comes home upset about something that happened at school, and instead of immediately getting worked up or trying to fix everything, you listen calmly and help him process his emotions. Your response teaches him that problems can be handled without panic, and it strengthens his trust in you as someone he can turn to during difficult times. Or maybe you're in a meeting in Denver where two departments are blaming each other for a project failure. Instead of taking sides or getting defensive, you calmly ask questions that help everyone focus on solutions rather than fault-finding. Your emotional stability helps de-escalate the situation and moves the conversation in a productive direction. The key to developing this skill is understanding that emotions are information, not instructions. When you feel angry, stressed, or frustrated, that emotion is telling you something important about the situation. But it doesn't have to control your response. You can acknowledge the feeling, understand what it's telling you, and then choose how to respond based on what will be most effective. This takes practice, especially in our culture that often rewards emotional reactivity. We see people getting angry on social media and assume that passion equals authenticity. We watch politicians and pundits who get worked up and think that shows they care more. But real strength comes from being able to feel emotions fully while still maintaining control over your actions. One practical technique is what I call the pause and breathe method. When you feel a strong emotional reaction building, take a moment to pause before responding. Take a deep breath. Ask yourself, what's really going on here? What outcome do I want? How can I respond in a way that's most likely to achieve that outcome? This doesn't mean becoming emotionally distant or robotic. You can still be warm, empathetic, and genuine while maintaining emotional control. In fact, when people know you're not going to react dramatically to every situation, they're more likely to open up to you and trust you with sensitive information. The ripple effects of emotional mastery extend far beyond just handling crises. When you're known as someone who stays calm under pressure, people naturally start seeing you as leadership material. They want you on their team for important projects. They seek your advice when they're facing difficult decisions. As powerful as emotional control is for earning respect and trust, it becomes even more impactful when combined with the confidence to walk away from situations that don't serve you. The final strategy will show you how this ultimate demonstration of self-worth can completely transform how people treat you. Trick 9. The power move that makes them chase you. Imagine this scenario. You're at a gathering in San Francisco and the energy is vibrant. People are mingling, laughter fills the air, and everyone seems to be having a good time. In the corner stands Mark, a quiet presence who isn't the life of the party. He's not dominating the conversation, but there's something about him that draws people in. Halfway through the evening, a small group gathers around him, laughing and engaged, while others try to get his attention. What's Mark doing differently? He's mastered the art of being selectively unavailable, and it's creating a magnetic pull that makes others want to engage with him. This is the power move that not only commands respect but also makes people chase after your company and attention. The principle here is simple yet profound. When you make yourself less available, you increase your perceived value. It's the same principle that applies to luxury brands. The more exclusive and harder to attain something is, the more people desire it. This is a psychological phenomenon rooted deeply in human behavior and is echoed in the teachings of Stoic philosophers. Marcus Aurelius noted, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." When you recognize and respect your own worth, others will naturally align with that perception. You begin to command attention not through constant availability, but by being someone whose presence is cherished rather than taken for granted. Let's consider how this plays out in everyday situations. When you're always the one to say yes to every social invitation, always available for work projects, or constantly checking your phone for messages, you inadvertently signal to others that your time is not precious. They begin to take your presence for granted, assuming you'll always be there. Conversely, when you create a little distance, people start to value your company more. This doesn't mean you should play games or be intentionally aloof. It's about setting healthy boundaries that demonstrate self-respect. When you prioritize your time and energy, you naturally become more selective about the commitments you take on. This not only makes you more appealing, but also gives you the space to invest in the relationships and activities that truly matter to you. Here's how to implement this principle in your life. Start by evaluating your social calendar. Are you overcommit? Are you saying yes to things out of obligation rather than genuine interest? If so, consider scaling back. When you decline a few invitations, people will start to notice your absence. They'll begin to appreciate your company more because it becomes less routine. In the workplace, this principle can be incredibly powerful. If you're constantly available to help others with their tasks, people may start to see you as a backup rather than a leader. However, when you set boundaries around your time and focus on your priorities, you communicate that your work is valuable. Others will begin to seek you out for your expertise rather than taking it for granted. Let's say you're in a team meeting in Chicago where everyone is brainstorming ideas. If you're always the first to jump in with solutions, people might become accustomed to your input and stop valuing it. Instead, try holding back at times. Let others express their thoughts first. When you do share your ideas, they will carry more weight because you've demonstrated thoughtful consideration rather than impulsive reaction. Another aspect of this principle is emotional availability. While you want to be present and engaged, you also need to maintain a sense of self-sufficiency. When you're too emotionally available, constantly seeking validation or approval from others, you risk coming off as needy. This can push people away instead of drawing them closer. Instead, cultivate your own interests and passions outside of your relationships. When you have a rich personal life filled with activities that fulfill you, you naturally become less dependent on others for your happiness. This self-sufficiency not only makes you more attractive, but also allows you to bring more to your connections with others. The ultimate goal here is to strike a balance. You want to be someone people genuinely enjoy spending time with, but also someone whose time is not taken for granted. When you master this balance, you'll find that people start seeking you out more, valuing your presence, and even chasing after your attention. As you begin to practice selective availability, remember that the respect and desire you cultivate in others should be rooted in authenticity. You're not trying to manipulate or play games, you're simply recognizing your own worth and making choices that reflect that value. This principle of selective availability becomes even more powerful when combined with emotional stability and genuine listening. When you create a magnetic presence built on self-respect and understanding, you position yourself as someone truly exceptional. In the end, it's about creating connections that are meaningful and enriching for both you and those around you. The next time you find yourself in a social situation or a professional setting, remember Mark and the power of being selectively unavailable. You might just find that people start chasing after you, eager to engage with the person they truly value. As we wrap up this exploration of 9 powerful psychological strategies rooted in Stoic wisdom, it's essential to recognize that each principle we discussed is not just a tactic but a pathway to deeper understanding and connection with others. By cultivating an air of mystery, practicing strategic silence, mastering storytelling, giving first, prioritizing yourself, genuinely listening, being selectively available, and maintaining emotional control, you are not merely enhancing your influence, you are transforming the way you interact with the world. Remember, these strategies are interconnected. Each one builds upon the last, creating a comprehensive framework that allows you to command respect and become someone people genuinely want to be around. The essence of these principles lies in authenticity and integrity. They are about fostering genuine relationships rather than manipulating others for personal gain. To truly embody these strategies, start by implementing small changes in your daily life. Reflect on how you can be more selective with your time, practice active listening in conversations, and approach challenges with emotional steadiness. Each interaction is an opportunity to showcase your growth and reinforce your value to those around you. As you embark on this journey, keep in mind the words of Marcus Aurelius: "The universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it." Embrace the idea that you have the power to shape your reality through your actions, thoughts, and relationships. When you prioritize your own worth and treat your time as valuable, others will naturally follow suit. Now, if you found value in these insights and want to continue your journey toward mastering Stoic principles in modern life, I encourage you to subscribe to the Stoic Viva channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update and join our community of like-minded individuals who are committed to personal growth and self-improvement. If this video resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might benefit from these teachings. Together, we can spread the wisdom of Stoicism and create a ripple effect of positive change in our lives and communities. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Remember, the power to command respect and influence is within you. Embrace it, practice it, and watch as your relationships flourish and your impact grows.